Hello and good evening. Welcome to the second half of the first half of the Simon Cider tastings here at the Plough in Shepreth, courtesy of Cambridge Beer Festival number 48. Hopefully the last time we're going to be doing an online event for the Beer Festival. Myself, Simon Gibson from Simon Cider. We have Chris Rouse, who is the cider bar manager from Cambridge, and we have Duncan Palmer, who is assistant cider bar manager at Norwich Beer Festival. What we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to be doing a cider tasting like you would do a wine tasting. It's going to be small amounts in the glass. We're going to be moving through it fairly quickly. We're going to be trying to do a drink every 10 minutes so that we can fit it into a nice little 2-hour slot and then just watch a few people fall over like dominoes here and there. If you have a look in your box, those of you who are at home, you'll notice that you've got a penny taped to the top of one of your bottles. The idea is you have the penny on the top, you put your bottle opener onto it, and as you open it, the penny will stop the top from creasing. What that means then is you just put it back on when you're finished, stick it in the fridge, and that'll keep for a couple of weeks. The other thing is you'll notice some of the bottles where there are sulfites in there. If anybody's intolerant to sulfites, have a look because it will be written on the label, whether it's on the plain labels that we've put on or whether it's on the labels that the makers have put on. Right, let's make a start, shall we? So, interestingly enough, we're going to start with bottle number 1. That's when it stops being easy.
So this first bottle is from Bertie's. Bertie's are in Braintree in Essex, and this is his Discovery. So it's a single variety apple. Discovery is a typical eating apple. You can buy it in the supermarket.
It's a great apple. It's one of the first ones to ripen in any kind of number in the country. Much loved by cider makers because it has lots of floral notes to it. It juices very, very well. It doesn't last very long, so you do find that they're quite easy to get hold of as you get into the apple season because the growers are trying to get rid of them before they all go off. Right, so first thing we do is we're looking at the clarity of it. So this is what we call, we've graded this as a sweet. If you hold it up to the light and put your thumb behind, if you can see all of your thumbnail and all the little bits, then that's clear. If you do the same and you can see that your thumb is there, but you can't see much definition, that would what we would call hazy. If you don't know your thumb's there, you've either fallen off thumb or it's properly cloudy. Next thing is to stick your nose into it. Quite nice and fruity on the nose.
Mm-hmm. But still quite delicate in terms of its aroma.
If you have a proper good pull on the nose on that one, you get those floral notes that are very, very typical of the Discovery apple. They come all the way through in it, and it's one of the great things about using Discovery apples is you do get that coming all the way through in the flavour, both on the nose and on the palate, and then in for a taste.
So, as Simon said at the beginning, this is sweet, and it's been sweetened with sucralose. Sorry, my microphone has been fettled. So, yes, so this is sweet. It has been sweetened with an artificial sweetener, sucralose. Now, one of the key things with a single variety is it tends to either have a very strong aroma or a very strong taste, but it rarely has both. So the taste of this, if you ignore the sweetness of it, there is not a huge amount of taste there. And this is typical for single variety.
Yeah, one of the things, when we talk about sucralose rather than sugar being used as a sweetener, it's a very different way that they work on your mouth and around on your palate. With sugar, you'll notice the sweetness kind of is all around your mouth. It's all enveloping as a sweetening. With sucralose, what you tend to find is you almost get like this wetting down the side of the tongue. You can taste it slightly in different places on your mouth. And that's usually indicative of whether something's been sweetened with sucralose or with sugar. And nowadays, it's unlikely that cider makers will sweeten with anything else. Generally, nowadays, you won't find people using stuff like saccharin, which gives a bitterness to it and is quite unpleasant in ciders.
Well, I would like to say that there are still some cider makers down in the southwest that still use saccharin.
Well, there's one who tips it in by the wheelbarrow full.
But indeed, certainly in the eastern part of the country, all cider makers use sucralose because it is far superior as a sweetener.
It also has some benefits, doesn't it? And it stops fermenting.
Well, yes, it is indeed. It's an unfermentable sugar, it being an artificial sweetener, which means it can be added without the risk of re-fermentation. All of the ciders that you typically get at a Canberra Beer Festival are live, so they haven't been pasteurised, which means if you suddenly add sugar, there is a strong risk that it will start fermenting again, which can have some very interesting results.
And it's not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's quite nice at a beer festival to actually have a cider that's got a little bit of sparkle and a little bit of life to it. And if it does get that happening, but normally because beer festivals, you're going through them so quickly, it's not something you have to worry about. We don't have to worry about at beer festivals about exploding bottles. And we don't have to worry, if we're not a pub, of having a cider sitting on your shelf that suddenly swells up to 3 times the size and falls off and explodes in the middle of your cellar, which can be quite upsetting apparently for people who have pubs.
Well, I can say that 20 litres goes a long way.
You've had one explode before, have you not?
I have seen the consequences of one that has exploded, yes.
Right, well, we've finished ours. You've all got water on your tables. Hopefully you've got some water at home. Tip a little bit of water into your glass, give it a little rinse out. That'll just get rid of the residue cider in there. So when you put the next one in, you're not mixing 2 ciders together. And one of the things that you really ought to try not to do is to leave the water in your glass when you pour your next cider into it. Because apparently a professional cider maker on Monday night did that and then said that his own cider tasted quite thin.
I don't remember there being any professional cider makers there on Monday night.
Was this online?
It might well have been online.
Yes.
That professional cider maker. Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry. Now I remember.
Yeah. So do make sure that you swill it and drink the water. It's good for you. It keeps you hydrated as well. So the next one we're going to go for, because we like to follow a sequence, is bottle number 4.
So, yes, one thing we forgot to say at the beginning, we are alternating between 2 boxes.
Sorry, yes.
So the previous one, the Bertie's, is in the East Anglian box, and this one, the second one, which is Pot and Press, is from the Cambridgeshire box.
Which is, of course, far more important for the people at home than the folks here who've only got the ones we've tasted today.
Yes.
And for those of you that are local who are going, but Potton's in Bedfordshire, the chap who makes it has moved to Papworth, which is in Cambridgeshire.
So unlike the previous one, this is still just about clear, but it does have a haze to it. Now, generally, whether it's clear or cloudy, it doesn't make any difference to the flavour, but it does make a difference to the mouthfeel. So we do have a cloudy one a bit later, and you will notice that the clear ones are very crisp and very smooth, whereas the cloudy ones tend to have a fuller body, a thicker mouthfeel to them.
So this is one, we actually bought this as a medium sweet. One of the things we do for beer festivals is that we grade the ciders immediately before the opening, or the day before, so that we can get all of the ciders throughout the range to sit into proper places. So sometimes we'll order a sweet and we'll receive a very sweet, but then that has to have the labels changed so it sits and looks in the right place when people ask for tasters. So this one actually was sent out to us was ordered as a medium sweet, and we've graded it as a very sweet. So you may well notice on this one a little bit more sweetness than you did on the previous one.
And I think we're getting the sucralose again, as we did with the first one.
This is indeed
slightly more obvious this time, though.
It is, yes. Now, one of the interesting things, when you give it a good sniff, it's got this very aromatic smell to it. And this is characteristic of russet apples. You can also get it with Crespin apples. And it's often related to the high ABV during, because the fermentation is quite vigorous.
And this one is 7.4, so it's cracking along there at a reasonable end of the scale. It's very nice. It's very fruity. It lingers well on the palate. You can taste again that there's sucralose in there. Too sweet for my palate, I have to say. I prefer something a bit more medium. I tend to find that if you oversweeten, you tend to lose some of the characteristics a little bit. One of the great things about russet, it is so full of characteristics. It's difficult to sweeten those out. So it does taste nice. It's got a bit of woodiness there. It's got a little bit of tannin as well. A hint of cardboard, but then you'll get that again with russet at times, especially from the last couple of years we've had where the autumns haven't been as good as they could be. So we haven't had the higher sugars and the higher esters. So all those things that make the fruity smells in things are caused by the esters. And if you don't get those being produced by the warm autumn, then they won't transfer into the fruit. So every now and again, you'll get something that's a little bit flatter than you would hope. But this is still, because it's predominantly russet, you can still taste a lot of that stuff. And that high ABV and that sweetness does make it cling to the mouth a little bit.
So we've had a question come in. What exactly is sucralose? So sucralose is derived from sugar, and it is significantly sweeter in powdered form compared to sugar. You're looking at about 600 times sweeter than sugar. So a little bit goes an awful long way.
That's very nearly as sweet as me.
You mean your sweet pea from the other day?
Yes. So it's an artificial sweetener, and it's a modern artificial sweetener. So it is often used as in diet foods and diet drinks, because not only is it unfermentable, the human body doesn't process it as sugar. So you tend not to put on weight, and you tend not to have a sugar response.
I'm obviously not using enough sucralose.
So preempting the next question then, Simon, what are esters you mentioned?
Esters, they're the chemical notes that make fragrance. So they're what give you the nice smells in stuff. So they're what lift off. If one of the things I've talked about in the past is that when you go to a cider maker like Weston's, where they evaporate and concentrate their own apple juice, is they've got this great big supersized boilers, and on top of them they've got this thing that captures all of the smelly bits. So, and then that's back into a liquid, and then they add that back in to create fruitiness in their ciders at the end. And it's a good way of doing it. I ferment in pretty much closed conditions, and by doing that and using plastic IBCs, that's intermediate bulk tank, big plastic tank in a cage, is that the esters are dropping back in all the time, because you get a little bit of heat created by fermentation that goes up, it sits into the top, it drops back in, and you're trapping most of that. If you have either an open fermentation or you use something that lets it vent out quite rapidly, then you'll lose some of that and you won't get that fruitiness staying within the cider either.
Well, I now have a little problem. My glass is empty.
Yes.
Yeah, but we're also only 15 minutes in, so we've only currently hitting, if we hit this one now, we're getting ahead of schedule.
We are.
What we need is somebody to ask an interesting question.
So if there is anyone out there who wants to ask a question, please do. If there's anyone in our audience that wants to ask a question, or if you're watching online, I believe it's Facebook. Are these questions coming through Facebook? Oh, and YouTube. Okay.
Anyway, the next one we're going on to, it's a gold capped screw bottle. And this is F.T.J. from Apple Cottage.
So Apple Cottage are from Hertfordshire. So this is in the East Anglian box. And this is a very popular cider at beer festivals. So again, this is crystal clear. I don't even need to hold my thumb up to this one, because I can pretty much see the people on the other side of the room.
Yeah.
Certainly smells fruity.
It certainly does.
And this is another sweet one. We ordered sweet, we got sweet. Yay! So while you're having a gentle taste, we've had another question. Can we still buy cider boxes, particularly for the Saturday tasting session? Yes, you can. They're available at simonscider.co.uk/products-sales-something else. But go to the shop, and they are on there. If you can buy them as soon as possible and not live in Edinburgh, that would be fantastic. And they will still come with a festival glass as well.
So Simon, would you say anything bought tonight would still arrive in time for Saturday?
It
Certainly
should.
locally to Cambridge.
Yeah, as long as people don't live in ridiculously outlying areas, I will try and ensure that they get them before the weekend.
Mm-hmm. And of course, you can relive these sessions and join us again anytime you like.
So
I've got quite a fruity cider here, son. Was I getting a little bit of tannin?
it has.
And would one of you like to explain tannin?
Well, first thing to get the full effect of the tannin in this is to swill it around your tongue, because it will then sort of manifest itself in a drying feeling. So it's an astringency. And it's often confused with a dry cider. And when we say sweet or dry, we mean the sugar content, right? Whereas tannin is a polyphenol compound that's found in the fruit, as well as the skin and the pips, and that comes through into the cider.
And the easiest way to tell really is just to push the tip of your tongue against the front of your mouth, the top of your mouth, and you'll feel that almost dragging, like it's a little bit chalky, and that's what you get from the tannins in there. It's definitely fruity. It's nice and sweet.
And you'll also find tannins in other things, like if you've made yourself a black tea or found a particular kind of red wine, you might notice tannins in those also.
We have had another question come in, and somebody's asked whether or not we can tell them about the festival glass. Yes, we can tell you about the festival glass. So this is the beautiful festival glass. Cask man on screen, attending some sort of video-based meeting. The glasses are available. If you go onto the Cambridge Beer Festival website, you can find a full list of all the pubs that have them. Do be quick, because pubs are selling out. They're also available from Simon's Cider and from Lord Conrad's. If you do want to get a glass, feel free to buy a box of cider from simonsider.co.uk, and it will be delivered to you before Saturday, in time for you to join in with the drinking on Saturday night.
And there's a glass in the box,
you
isn't
could
there?
just buy the glass, and we'll get it to you somehow.
And if you buy the box, you do get the glass.
And if you buy the box, you do get the glass. So yeah, another very nice, very drinkable cider, very typical of Eastern counties, but with a little bit of tannin in there. I'm assuming that the tannin is coming either from the skins or from the seeds in this one, because it's not dominant. It's just a gentle little note in there.
Right.
And one of the things with tannin, so when you talk about, generally it's something that you get in the West Country ciders. The apples there, they're not the kind of thing you're going to want to eat. They're very high in tannins. They're sometimes very high in acid as well. The flesh of them is quite woody. So they are quite a difficult apple to deal with. If you bit into one, you'd know that it wasn't an eating apple. And the same goes for Perry pears. When we move on to the Perry, we'll talk about that a little bit more. But looks like people are swilling glasses. It looks like we're going for 7-minute tasting sessions at the moment.
I'm sure they'll slow down.
At this rate, we're going to be done before the beer tasting on Tuesday night starts.
Of course, if we have too much time left, we can always just start again and go
We
around.
could just start again. Oh, yes, you can. Do you want to pick the microphone up, shove it in your face? Well done.
And turn it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was the variety of apple in this one?
The one we just had would have been a mix of apples.
Yeah.
F.T.J is just a general blend, mainly of dessert apples. Like I say, you can't really taste any big tannin in there, so I'm assuming if there is any cider apples, it's probably very few.
No, they don't use.
Thank you.
Right, okay, they don't use
for
cider
this.
apples at all.
Well, no, they do. Some of their ciders are made with cider apples, but this one isn't.
Right, next one is bottle number 8.
Which is one of my favourites. It's Dirty Habit from Spinney Abbey. So Spinney Abbey is Cambridgeshire.
I'm
We
not
were just
going to make the
about
same
to
mistake
make the
this time.
mistake of filling a glass with water in. Try again.
So you will notice for the people that are attending here that you've got some crackers on the table as well. And they're just to clean your palate between ciders. So feel free to open them up and break a little piece of cracker off every now and again.
So again, this one is clear. Now, one interesting thing this year is a lot of the ciders that we've got here are clear. This isn't normally the case. We normally get a mixture of clear, cloudy and hazy. But for some reason, we have a lot of clear ones this year. So let's have a sniff.
Certainly smells fruity.
And smells very fruity. There's a lot of strong aroma there. Now, one of the things that you will notice is the ABV of this, and this is a 4%. Naturally, ciders will ferment to around between 5.5 to 8%. So that's due to the natural sugars in the apples. When we get a cider that's around 4%, it's obvious that it's been watered down in some way, either with plain water or with apple juice. And that's what Spinney Abbey have done here on purpose to bring the ABV down to 4%, which is a session cider. You know, you go to a pub and you look at the beers, they're typically around 4%. Typical ciders around 6-7%. You start drinking pints at the same rate as a beer drinker does, you will be flat on your face rather quickly. So quite a few cider makers do a session cider. This is the one from Spinney Abbey. Simon, your session cider?
Yeah, we do. And we do short sterling. Short sterling, we take our as it comes, which is just a general blend of cooking and eating apples. We add 15% apple juice to that and 10% water and a little bit of citric acid to make your mouth water, so it's nice and refreshing and makes you want to go back and have more. But session ciders are very popular. You do tend to find a lot of pubs when they're ordering will order a session cider more than they will anything else. Purely because customers look, and as I say, they look at the numbers and they go, I don't want to be drinking 6.5% all night. So at least having something there that they can at least dip their toe into, as it were, is a good idea.
Yeah.
So you'd say then in this case, this has got sort of extra added juice and a little extra water in it?
This is both juice and water, because if you just add loads of water, you are diluting the flavour and the aroma, and that's not happening here.
And of course, the extra juice is added to the sweetness.
Correct, yes.
Yeah,
Hence this is another sweet.
We have just had another question asking why a low ABV is a session cider. And it's purely for that thing that if you're going out and you're having a session, you're out for the evening, this is a cider that you could probably quite happily drink right through the evening and have that as your predominant drink, and still be able to stumble home without scraping your nose on the floor.
Yeah, and certainly as a cider drinker, I've gone out with beer drinking friends before. They've had a pint, I've had a pint, a couple of pints later. I can tell the difference, and they look like they're sober.
Yes.
Because they're drinking at less than 4%, and I'm drinking at 6+. And suddenly you need to sort of remember to treat the cider with a little bit more care. You don't need to drink, so you drink it a little slower than beer perhaps, but certainly not as slow as you would a glass of wine.
And of course, we advocate drinking responsibly and sensibly at all times.
Of course. On the same subject, Cromwell Cider, they also have a session cider, and it's called Session. So,
And a very nice cider it is as well.
It is indeed.
Anybody would think Tony was in the room.
Now, one thing you will notice, this has also got some very soft tannins there. So if you swill it around your mouth, you've got that sort of chalky coating, drying feeling. Oh, can you tell us who you are? Are you a Cambridge Beer Festival volunteer? What do you do at the festival?
So, Chris, could you tell us who you are, please? Are you a Cambridge Beer Festival volunteer? What do you do at the festival?
Okay, yes, I am
Because many
a
of us
volunteer.
wonder.
So, yes, I'm a volunteer at the Cambridge Beer Festival, and I'm the cider bar manager at Cambridge Beer Festival. So that means I go to all of the planning meetings and I order all of the cider. I then coordinate the setting up of the bar and the running of the bar during Cambridge Beer Festival week.
Commandeer staff.
I then coordinate the takedown of the cider bar and other parts of the festival as well.
As well as delegating all the jobs to all your deputy managers and other volunteers during the week.
Then I generally end up getting everyone else to do the work while I swan around doing nothing. Yes, that's.
Well, like a prima donna. Just checking.
Well, aside from the obvious jobs that you see some of the bar staff doing, just serving the drink isn't all of what needs to go on at a cider bar.
Certainly not. So
Duncan, why don't you tell us more about your experiences at Norwich?
My experience is Norwich. So at Norwich Beer Festival, I'm deputy cider bar manager. I'm there from setup to takedown, and my responsibilities are particularly for the items on the stillage. That's the shelving unit with all the ciders on. I've got to get them all up there, retest them all just in the same way that we're going through our ciders this evening, and I'm responsible for all of the box changes every time one runs out during the week. When I'm not doing all of that, I'm still serving customers just like the rest of the volunteers.
And a big part of the job for people at the festival working on the cider bar is the tasting and testing and making sure that the ciders are right before it starts and that the ciders are right throughout the festival so that people get the best experience all the way through. We do pick up faults sometimes in ciders, and as I say, you will get ciders that we've ordered to be specifically one level of sweetness or dryness that are something completely off. And that's something that we all need to know about so that it all sits in the right place. And it's the same way with the guys who run the beer side. They're constantly checking. I mean, you just look at them stumbling around, you know that they're checking all the time to make sure the beer's right. You're welcome, Pete. Okay, so we're moving on next. So we're now on bottle number 6 because it's drink number 5.
Of course. Right, so the story behind the reason why we have this one here is for the East Anglian box, I tried to ensure we had a good selection from East Anglia outside of Cambridgeshire. So we had some from Norfolk, a couple from Essex, one from Hertfordshire. I also wanted some from around the country. So we had one from Yorkshire, one from Kent, one from Herefordshire, and I wanted one from Somerset. And it certainly appears that the old pony post would have been faster than trying to use email with some of the Somerset makers. And we ended up with no cider from Somerset. So we had to substitute, and we substituted with Simon's East Meets West.
That's easy for you to say, love.
So how many have you had?
And the reason being, it's a blend of an Eastern cider with a West Country cider.
Yeah, so again, as it comes is our base blend. That's the one we make most of because it is just everything thrown in of dessert and cooking apples. And then what we add is 40% of the Dabinet, which we got from an organic farm down in Somerset. We get them to press the juice for us and send it up so that there's very little by way of food miles or drink miles. And it means that we've then got the control of it. So it's sent up with a little bit of sulfite in it so it doesn't start fermenting before it arrives. And that means that then I'm able to blend it with the ciders that I've already got fermenting to make sure that the yeasts that I have that are specific to my ciders are also the ones that work in the West Country juice.
Now, one of the key things is this is nearly cloudy.
Yeah, I'd say that's just
about
cloudy.
see the outline of your finger, but we would say this is cloudy. It's not the most cloudy we've had. Now, one of the key things is when you're tasting this one is to concentrate on the mouthfeel, and you will notice that it is thicker and has more body to it.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, so the blend of the Dabinet and the Eastern County style, first thing you get is you get acidity on the palate. You get that little bit of sharpness. Then you start to get the fruity notes come through, and then you've got the drying effect of the tannins coming as well. And the Dabinet apple is quite strong on tannins. So it's a definite feeling now throughout the mouth when you've got that proper chalkiness going on with it.
Certainly tell that more on the second mouthful than the first one.
Yes.
It suddenly builds up on you as you go along.
And the other interesting thing with the different types of apples, so cooking and eating apples will tend to produce a cider that's very pale in colour. So West Country cider apples tend to produce cider with a much darker colour. Now, as this is a blend, this is sort of halfway between the two. But sometimes you'll see a very dark cider, possibly dark brown. That is typical of cider apples pressed in the West Country. And the reason it goes brown is because tannins react with oxygen and they go brown. So it's actually an oxidization process that gives you that brown colour.
And the idea was with this cider was I wanted to create something that was a bit like a scrumpy. So I wanted something that had that sharpness of a young cider. So you've got that through the Eastern County side of it going in there. I wanted something that was distinctly West Country, something where you knew you'd had a cider apple. And Dabinet definitely brings that. Dabinet brings that with, there's old fruit notes in there, there's tannins, there's dryness, It's a really nice apple to blend into. It's fantastic to drink on its own, but it's a great one for blending into other stuff. And it works well in this because it gives you, even though both of these ciders have been quite well aged and are at least 2 years old, it still gives you that young flavour with that zestiness and that zing to it. But then all that deep woody notes and everything else you get from the Dabinet as well. So I hope you're enjoying it.
It's certainly one of the more complicated drinks that we've had so far this evening.
Well, yes. So going back to single variety, if you start blending your apples, you can, when you make a cider, you can either blend the apple juice at the beginning and then ferment the blended juice, or you can blend ciders after they've fermented, and both are perfectly valid. And it's something that I happily do on a bar, and I will happily do for customers. If a customer asks for half a pint of one cider and half a pint of another cider in a pint glass, I'm happy to do that, because that is fundamentally no different to what cider makers are doing before they deliver the cider. It's not something you do with beer. I've got some beer drinkers shaking their heads.
Unless you're in Cantillon, and I suppose that's about the only people. There's very few people who blend beers together, but a lot of the mixed firm guys now are starting to do a little bit more.
And certainly if you get a cider, you think that's almost perfect. I really like that, but it's just a little bit too whatever it is that's standing out. Go back and find another one that's got a little bit of something sort of opposite. Mix the two together at whatever ratio takes your fancy, and then you might actually come up with something that you go, that's me in a glass.
Yeah. And when we're talking about these complexities and everything else, I mean, we're kind of glossing over here because we're trying to get through an evening as well before everybody falls asleep. If you want to learn more about it, then go onto the Camera Learn and Discover website, where there's lots of little talks on there. There's lots of bits of information, and there's plenty of stuff on there from a load of great reviewers, from people involved in the cider industry who have given lots of their time to give loads of little talks. I mean, I didn't, because they didn't come and ask me, but there you go. I'm doing this instead. But it is well worth going a visit. There's lots of extra information on there.
Right, well, this is definitely a cider that needs your glass rinsing out.
In a good way.
In a good way, because we definitely don't want it contaminating the next cider, which is a lot more delicate in its flavour.
So for those of you that hear, a drop of water and perhaps a little bit of one of your crackers.
Yeah, as we're having quite a big change in style, it's definitely worth having a piece of cracker just to add to the cleansing of your palate. I'll pass you another pack of crackers, Claire.
Okay, so the next one we're going on to is Cromwell. So this is from the Cambridgeshire box, and this is Cromwell's Sweetheart, which is one of his standard ciders. And as the name sort of intimates, it's a sweeter cider.
As opposed to our last one, which is like medium dry going on dry.
So it's clear. Now, one of the things with Tony's ciders is he does mature it for an extra year. So normally you would press apples in October, you would put them in a large container, that would ferment over the winter, and then mature, and then come around May, June, that's when the cider is ready to drink. However, Tony leaves it an extra year before he starts using and selling the cider. So what you end up with is a cider that is well matured, lots of flavour.
It's very mellow. It's nice and easy to drink. Interestingly, although it is a sweet, this is one that doesn't come too sweet on my palate. There's a nice little bit of acidity there. There's a nice amount of fruitiness, so it does open up well on the palate. And there's plenty of body to it as well.
Yeah.
And some of the other ciders have been a little bit lacking in the end, whereas this isn't. This is one that actually sits there and is quite punchy all the way through.
Yes, this I think is the first one where the flavour actually lingers and has a very significant aftertaste, as well as aroma and initial taste.
Also getting a little bit of sort of fizz to it on this one.
There is, yes.
Yeah, I mean, those of you will notice there's never such a slight effervescence on it. And one of the things Tony very sensibly does is he protects it with a bit of CO2 on top. And what you'll inevitably get is you'll get a little bit of CO2 will seep into the liquid, which will give us this tiny little bit of effervescence. But it's not carbonated. It's just a little bit going in there. But it's a really nice drink. It's very nice to drink. Tony is well established as a cider maker. He's not quite one of the nicest people I know, but he's up there sometimes. If he was listening to me, he'd probably hear what I was saying.
But he's clearly not.
He's clearly not. And it's great to be able to represent so many of the people that we have at the beer festival year in, year out. And that was why we did these 2 boxes, because there are people that are going to be at the beer festival every year because they're Cambridgeshire cider makers and they produce good stuff. And then it was then looking around at the rest of the country to see what other really good stuff there was about as well. So that's the main reason for doing these, and to give people the experience of the cider festival at home or out in pubs, and wonderful pubs like Plough and Shepreth that did a fantastic barbecue tonight. Thank you very much, Nick.
Oh, how long have we been volunteers at the beer festival?
Oh,
we have a question.
We have
a question. How long have we been volunteers at the beer festival?
Oh.
As I know the answer to my own, I started at Norwich in 2015. A couple of years later, I started adding other festivals along. So I've done 2 Cambridge Saturdays. I've added Paul, Chelmsford, Reading. Did a couple of GBBF winters when they were in Norwich. Chris, you've been doing beer festivals longer than I have.
Yes, I started in 2008. My first beer festival I ever volunteered at was Cambridge Beer Festival. I was dragged kicking and screaming because they put out an announcement on the tannoy, desperate for volunteers. And the friend I was with, who was a camera member, said, yes, we must volunteer. And I said, but I just want to drink cider. Anyway, I ended up volunteering on the cider bar, helping the then cider bar manager, Tim Cosgrove. A year later, I decided to do the whole week. The year after that, I was the cider bar cellar manager. And the year after that, I was the cider bar manager. Simon.
Simon dodged most of those bullets. I think my first volunteering, was 2007. And then I had a bit of time away from it. And Paula and I went back into volunteering 2011, maybe 2012, something like that. It's a direct result of being a volunteer at the beer festival, which is originally I was on beer bars, because that was kind of where I thought I liked to be, until I realised that there were 100 ciders, and I like cider. So in 2011, yes, it must have been 2010 the first time. So in 2011, I went and shoved myself through the cider bar door and said, "Can I come here?" And Chris said, "Yes." What do you know about cider?
I said I do not say no to anyone who wants to volunteer for the cider bar.
So yeah, that was my introduction. Learned how to taste ciders, how to serve ciders, how to deal with customers as well. Because dealing with thousands of customers over a week, all with different needs and wanting different things, is quite difficult, because not everybody walks up to the bar with their money in their hand, their exact change, saying, "I'd like a pint of that, please, or a half of that, please." Most of them, I love you all to bits, have no idea what they're doing by 8:30. But that's what we're there for. We're there to make it nice and easy for them and to help them get through it all.
Helping people find something they'll actually like on a cider bar is actually part of the fun of serving on a cider bar.
It is, and we all have a 3-hit rule. When we're giving tasters out, if you haven't managed to match somebody to a cider within 3, then you're doing something either they're severely wrong, and that reminds me of a young lady at Chelmsford who I told, "You don't like cider, go and drink something else." And she didn't like beer either, so I think she went to the wine bar in the end. But it is one of those things where it's good for us, because it's good practice. It's good practice on your palate, and it's nice to be able to work with people, to work with customers, and to work with volunteers who are really interested and passionate about what they do. So yes, there you go.
And the last thing we want is you to leave the cider bar with a cider that you're going, "I've got a pint of this. I wish I hadn't ordered it," after one mouthful, and go, "Well, that must mean I don't like cider," and you go and drink something else. We would love you to go away with something going, "You know what, that was pretty good. I really enjoyed that." I'd like to try something else that's similar to that and come back and have another go. Well, you might find that the first one you had was the best anyway, for you personally. As for ending up volunteering the bar side of it, Chris, you said you don't turn people away. Sometimes I think you drag them, however subtly you try and do it.
Yes, I have been known to coerce people. We do have a question. Rob asks, what makes you guys volunteer at the festival? Why do you do it?
Good question, Rob.
Very good
If
question.
you ever find out, mate, let me know.
Why do we do it?
Well, I can certainly, from my point of view, the first time I was dragged into volunteering, it was a Thursday night and it was really busy. It was 4 deep at the cider bar, and I'd maybe tasted 2 of the ciders on the bar, and I was just guessing, which is not the way to do it. But and I, after a while, because of what customers were saying, I got into a rhythm. I knew which one to start people on. It was a medium, and I went from there. But the next day, I got there early, and I tasted every single cider on the cider bar.
Some things haven't changed.
And I made notes. I got a program, and I made notes. And that meant when people asked me later that day, what do you recommend? I knew which ciders to go for. If they didn't know, I started off with a medium that was easy drinking. If they liked that, great. If that wasn't sweet enough, give them a sweet one. If it was too sweet, try a dry one. Simple things like that. And from that, I enjoyed being able to taste every cider on the bar without having to have a half of each. So I got huge amounts of experience from that first festival, and that sort of kept me in good stead, because now that I do sort of 5-6 beer festivals a year, under normal circumstances, I get to taste 2,000 to 3,000 ciders a year. And that really is why I do it, because that gives me the ability to help others, to educate people, to explain about cider, and most importantly, find the cider you want to drink, because that means you go away happy. It means you come back, and that means you are then supporting cider makers throughout the country.
For me, it's the camaraderie. The people that you work with, especially when you do the whole of the festival, from standing on the gate at 7:30 on day 1 to standing on the gate at 7:30 on the Friday night of day 20, which I've not yet done. The people that you're working with, the hours people put in, the effort people put in all year round. And some of the people that are there are the people you make as friends for life. Some of the people there are people you're glad not to see for another year. It does to work both ways. And I'm sure there are probably at least maybe 2-3 people that feel the same way about me. But it is a great place to be. It's a great place to spend time with people. And it's a great place to have such access to such good drinks, both on the cider bar and on the beers, because I'm a bit of a switcher. I don't mind which way I swing, to be honest. If there are good beers, I'll go and drink those as well. And so, and if anybody's sitting there thinking, oh, that sounds like it might be all right, it is. It's great. Come along next year, do a couple of sessions, be a volunteer, see how nice it is, see what people are really like. And, of course, you get free food and drinks to a certain minute. Don't overdo it, please, because we really don't like the people that fall flat on their faces at 10 to 12 at night.
Unfortunately,
usually because they've been drinking too much water and keeping away from the alcohol.
You can always have a drink while working on the cider bar, but unfortunately, drunk bar staff are not very useful.
Neither are drunk customers, which is why we have responsible drinking. Anyway, let's get on to the next drink.
Indeed.
While we're talking about drinking.
While we're doing
we're now moving on to one with a shiny green top, little bright green top. This is Windhill Perry.
Gosh, this is even further from Norfolk than I'm, even further north in Norfolk than I am.
Yes. So one of the, our set appears to be falling down at the moment.
So while everybody else is breaking things, I'll talk above it. So this is from Windhill, who are based in Wells, next to the sea, out in Norfolk on the coast.
Norfolk coast.
They've got, I think it's around about 19 acres of cider apple trees planted over there. When we talk about cider apples and dessert apples and how they grow and how they're quite specific to certain areas, So cider apples and Perry pears tend to grow in the West Country of England, northern France. The great thing for Win Hill is because they're on the Norfolk coast, they've got the better weather there where it's slightly cooler, slightly damper, and it means that cider apples and Perry pears grow incredibly well there. And that makes a big difference into the final drink.
So this is Win Hill's Perry. And the most important thing for me about this is in 2018, it was CAMRA's National Bronze Perry. So every year, under normal circumstances, CAMRA runs a cider competition, national championships. It starts off at the regional rounds. So we have the Cambridgeshire Cider Competition at Cambridge Beer Festival. There are competitions throughout the country, and the winners of those go forward to the finals, which are held at Reading Beer Festival in early May. And Win Hill Perry won the East Anglian Perry competition and went forward to the national competition. And in 2018, it came bronze, came third in the country for Perry that year.
Now, this Perry may be from North Norfolk, but it certainly smells and looks reasonably dark, and looks sort of almost as if it come from the West Country.
You could easily, well, it is from Perry pears, so it's what you would expect. So it's clear, it's a typical West Country aroma to it. So that sort of bitter, sharp smell to it is typical of Perry pears.
I'm getting a little bit of tannin.
And then when you taste it, it's...
I think one of the things that's quite nice with this is on the nose, it's quite soft and gentle. It's almost like a vanilla note there.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of fruitiness. It's a little bit of a vanilla note. But what the difference with this is to some of the others is that the taste, the palate on it is massively different. It really
there's
packs
a
big
lot
punch.
of flavour there. And there's also that tannin again. So there's different types of tannins. There's a whole range of them. This one is for me, it's coating the whole of the front of my tongue.
Yeah.
Whereas the others were primarily the sides. So one thing we should have said at the beginning is everyone tastes differently. So, for us, what would be sharp might not be sharp to everyone. Some people have different tolerances to tannins. I know that I'm particularly sensitive to tannins. Other people are not. So they would not recognise the tannins in something like this, whereas I do.
And I don't have a sweet palate. Sweet ciders to me are something I can drink and something I can taste, but they're not something I would generally go back to.
So, Simon, as a medium sweet, how do you find this one?
This is very, very nice. It's got loads of, the fruitiness is absolutely fantastic. The tannins are really nice. So the tannins are, so we talked about it before, it's what you get in a strong cup of tea. They're a strong red wine, like a Tempranillo, something like that. They're a compound polyphenol.
Polyphenol compound.
And if you think about leather, leather is tanned. They extract from oak to get these polyphenols which preserve the leather. And it's something quite sharp, quite twangy. If you've ever worked in a tannery, which I did for about 2 weeks, it's another one to add to the list for Claire and Bert. Sorry, stuff going on. So it's absolutely lovely. It's a proper big mouthful of flavour. It lingers quite nicely. The tannins keep going for quite a long way. And interestingly, the tannins are great because they seem to make my tongue whistle every now and again.
And the other thing about Perry is pears contain a high level of sorbitol. So sorbitol is a natural sugar, but it's an unfermentable sugar. So it's one of those rare natural sugars that doesn't ferment, and also the human body doesn't recognize it as a sugar, so it's often used in so-called sugar-free chewing gum. It is a sugar, it just doesn't rot your teeth, and it doesn't go to wrong parts of your body.
Well, it does. It goes to one wrong part of your body because it's also a laxative.
Well,
anyway, we're going to gloss over that because we talked about that quite extensively on Tuesday. And if anybody wants to hear about laxatives, on Monday, they can go back to Mondays and watch that and listen to Chris espousing both the sucking of tea bags and the effects of sorbitol. Right, but this is really nice.
Yes.
Like I say, the sorbitol says it's more in perry pears than it is in dessert pears. So for those of us who use dessert pears to make our perries, we have to do an extra little bit of sweetening. This tastes like it's been sweetened, probably with sugar by the taste of it. Gives a little bit more roundness to it, which is quite nice. Oh, it's always nice to see the tech people getting a beer brought out to them. Don't worry, Neil, we won't tell anybody. Press officer.
So we have another tech person that's getting very much rehydrated with what looks like water.
But a very nice drink. To be honest, that's one I would probably like more if it had some sparkle to it, to be honest.
Well, interestingly, Windhill do sparkling perries.
They do
in their bottles.
They do.
Certainly for the perry in the boxes that you've got, I specifically asked for it to be uncarbonated. So normally their ciders and perries are in bottles. So if you're interested, go onto their website.
Now we can get out, go to Wells, have fish and chips, drink cider in a car park. That's what you should do. Unless you're going to go to Godmanchester, where apparently there's fantastic cidery that's going to be open the second weekend of July. Hopefully, if all the restrictions get lifted. But it's very nice. It's very well worth seeking out. Everybody that we have on these cider lists tonight, they do much more than what we've got here, obviously. And they are worth looking out for because the styles might change, the ciders might change, but the passion and the work that goes into it is the same, and it results in good drinks and great drinks all the way through. Right.
Simon, you mentioned the cidery in Godmanchester might be opening. Do you know who cidery that might be?
That I think, if I remember rightly, let me just check. Yeah, that's Simon's Cider. Yes. So yeah, we're looking forward to reopening. We've taken on a lot of events during June purely because we didn't know what the roadmap to opening was going to be. And I kept ringing Dominic Cummings up, but he wasn't replying. So yeah, we thought we had the opportunity to go and do some outdoor events. So they were least likely to get stopped. So we've booked into weekends doing that. So we are quite busy through June. Right, okay. I've now got a dry glass again. So we're going to now move on to the red cap, which is Duxford Scrumpy Company's Wisley Crab Vintage.
From your Cambridgeshire box, for those of you at home.
It is part of the Cambridgeshire box, yes.
Indeed. Now, going back to the choice of the ciders and perries that we've got here, when I was sort of trying to put together these boxes, I wanted to include all of the Cambridgeshire makers, but unfortunately there's only 11 slots, and I could only have ciders from those makers that were able to supply what we needed and what we wanted. So there are other cider makers that unfortunately we couldn't include. They will be available at the next beer festival if they're still going. Unfortunately, some cider makers have now had to close up shop as a result of the COVID pandemic. But certainly, next beer festival, I'm hoping to have the full range.
And we do have several cider makers in the county that are so tiny, not as cider makers, but in volume they produce, that they just didn't have anything left to give to us anyway. But thankfully for Jerry, because I know this is one of Jerry's personal favourites, so much so that he planted a tree in the garden. So it's beautifully clear. It's got a wonderful rosy colour to it. It's one of those rare examples where crab apples are used rather than, as we've pretty much been talking about all night. Puckering there. Yes. So they use the Wisley crab, which is a red-skinned and partially red-fleshed apple, which obviously gives you this rosy colour to the finished cider as well. It brings lots of fantastic attributes. Jerry, do you want to pick up a mic and have a little chat about Wisley crab as you like it so much? Give me a break.
Yeah, so this year, a bit disappointed actually, because I went out and had a look at the tree today, and it's got about 4 apples on it.
Oh, no.
That's had a terrible spring, because I think it was just so cold and
Yeah.
wet, and the bees just couldn't really get at it.
No.
So it's a bit of a shame. But what's interesting with this year is the colour of this. To I think 3 years ago at Cambridge, it was much more red.
Yeah.
Much more red.
Yeah. And this is a vintage. So
they
this
just change every year, don't they?
Yeah.
The
So
quality.
this is 2 years old. one of the big things to note is that, again, as I was saying earlier on, is that when you get an autumn where you don't get really good ripening of the fruit, lots of the characteristics change. And it's something that we have to deal with year in, year out. We're not brewers. We can't take a set recipe and put exactly the same things in at exactly the same times and exactly the same temperatures. We just pray to the appley gods that we're going to get a good autumn where we get lots of sunshine, a decent amount of rain so that the fruit swells and ripens. Things like the Wisley crab, things like Discovery apples, Geneva crab, they're apples that get colour into the flesh, and that does carry through into the cider when you're doing it. And if you don't get a lot of sunshine, then you don't get all that coloration going on, and you end up with fruit that's different in character and in taste. And that's something that we then have to try and build on, and either produce something different or just accept that it's going to go out tasting different this year than it did last. But we do try to, and Tony will agree on this, is one of these things is we always try and aim for the same experience in the drink, even if the flavour isn't exactly the same. We try and make sure that what you get on your palate is recognisable to the drink you've had before.
Is the most people associate crab apples being really small. Yeah, the Wisley crab, it's as big as an eater.
Yeah.
You know, they're big apples.
Yeah.
And they're bloody lovely.
Yeah, yeah, that's it. I mean, another one, I mean, I mentioned it, the Geneva crab is another one. It's a beautiful, proper purple. There's a cider maker out near, is it Orwell Cider? Out near Orwell Bridge. He comes along to Cider Festival pretty much every year. And he's got an old lady around the corner with 2 or 3 Geneva crab trees in the garden. And he makes this beautiful purple cider from those. The only other people I've seen make purple cider put beetroot in it. So, yeah, and it's great. It's lovely. It's got a little bit of tannin. Crab apples contain more tannin than dessert fruits, but less tannin than cider apples. So you are getting that little bit of a tannic nose in there as well.
I'm getting a hit, quite a strong tannin, but it's very brief.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not lingering.
right up the centre of my tongue.
Yeah. And it's very, very floral.
So we've had softer tannins that lingered longer, but this one's quite a hard tannin, but it's suddenly gone again.
Somebody has asked why they put beetroot in cider. Basically, people want to have something that's slightly different. Beetroot juice has an earthiness to it, which kind of goes in all right into cider. It can almost mimic like the tannic notes that you get. And they'll put it in there because they want to create a rosy or a purpley coloured cider to make it more attractive to get people to buy it. It's as simple as that. It's purely a commercial thing.
It's purely to change, to increase the appeal of the cider.
Well, we're doing well. We're halfway through the time, and we're 3/4 of the way through the box.
Not bad.
Well, it's time
So that's going all right.
then.
Thank you very much for people that are popping questions in.
Do you need more volunteers to help run the festival?
Hell yeah.
Yes. So we need volunteers at all levels of the festival. And, anyone who is interested, even if you don't want to serve drinks, there are plenty of other requirements throughout the festival. If you're interested in people, if you're a people type person, we have an office dedicated to the volunteers. So
they need help.
We have cellar teams who do a lot of the cellar work. So the moving of casks, the tapping of barrels on cider, it's moving of tubs.
And boxes.
Call me what?
And bagging boxes.
Yes. People are intimating we have a cheese counter. So Cambridge Beer Festival is one of the few CAMRA beer festivals that actually runs its own food counter. And the cheese counter at Cambridge Beer Festival is well known throughout the country, and it is run entirely by volunteers, CAMRA volunteers. So if anyone is interested in sort of serving food.
So you've also got people working on reception. So when you arrive there, they're the people that let you in. And there's this tiny team that's absolutely fantastic, run by probably one of the stalwarts of the festival, who look after the glassware, who make sure that you have clean glasses, to make sure that there are enough glasses for you to drink out of year in, year out, day in, day out. It's a massive thing. And I've seen the state of the poor old fella. He's 10 years younger than me. And I tell you what, you would not believe it. You really wouldn't believe it. But yeah, there are so many areas where things can be done. If you go onto the Cambridge Beer Festival website, there should be a link on there for volunteers, and you'll be able to register your interest. There isn't yet, but at some point there will be. So please feel free to go back to it.
Yeah.
I can give you the volunteering officer's phone number if you like. Just ping me a message at simonsider.co.uk, and we can do that for you.
And it's not just Cambridge Beer Festival that will need volunteers. Every beer festival is run by volunteers, and nearly all of them, you would find out how to volunteer and usually sign up from their websites a couple of months before the festival itself. You don't have to do the whole. You don't have to do the whole festival.
No,
You don't have to do the whole festival.
You can do 2 or 3 hours.
So you do have to do the whole festival. You do have to do the whole festival.
Yeah. If you're Chris and Simon, you end up doing the whole festival.
Yes, but no, you don't. You don't have to do the whole festival. You can sign up to do just a couple of sessions. Now, obviously, we are busiest on like a Friday night and on a Saturday. That's when we need more volunteers. So they tend to be the times when most people don't want to volunteer. But without volunteers, we can't serve, right? So if you can give up some of your time on a Friday night or a Saturday for Cambridge or any of the other Canberra Beer Festivals, it will be very welcome.
Anyway, we'll get back to the arm twisting in a minute because I just need to tilt the wrist slightly.
While Simon pulls
so
the next
we're on to the next one, which is bottle number 2, because we're now at drink number 9.
Yes.
I'm just thinking for Norwich, my home festival, I sign up all week. For Cambridge, I just come and do the Saturday when I'm needed most, because I haven't got another week.
So this cider is Biddington Strong, which is from the East Anglian and rest of the country box. So Biddington is from Kent, and we don't even need to look because we know that this is going to be crystal clear.
That looks pretty clear to me.
And this was the cider on my shopping list. So Biddington are winemakers. They've got vineyards down in Kent, but they also make cider. And they make very, very good cider, but it's in the Kentish style.
Yeah, indeed. So,
and the Kentish style is more of a wine style. So they tend to be cleaner. They tend to be a bit more vinous. They have that wine-like note to them. I mean, clear as a bell because it's probably been put over a cross-flow filter. You don't need to know what one of those is. And sweetened with sugar. Again, it's got that nice softness on the palate that's all over the palate that you get from sugar.
So we are medium sweet or sweet here?
I'd say it's a medium sweet, mainly because that's what I've got written down on a piece of paper.
Well, one of the confusing things about ciders and tasting, I alluded earlier to the effect of tannin being drying and confusing that with a dry cider in terms of the lack of sugar. Well, fruitiness, which is this drink is just packed full of fruitiness. You can confuse fruitiness with sweetness. So when you taste this, right, there's not actually a huge amount of sugar there. What you're actually tasting is the fruitiness.
So the fruitiness and the little bit of sugar there is giving you a sweeter feeling than perhaps.
That's it. So many people would just taste that and say it's sweet. Well, actually, it's not really sweet in terms of how we grade ciders.
And if you've still got some in your glass, stick your nose in there again and have a good old snort on it, because this is an 8%er. You can smell the alcohol level in that. Very different to all the ones that have gone before, where they've been sort of more fruity and not much else. This has got alcohol as well as fruit on the nose there.
It is very deceptive. Yeah. You wouldn't believe that you're drinking an 8% cider there. And sometimes we do have to warn customers when they order it. We have to say, you do know that's an 8% cider. Because after 2 pints of that in quick succession, you are staggering about all over the place. Well, I am anyway.
Nobody notices.
Is that why it's so much fun to work with you?
Well, going back to drinking while volunteering as a cider bar manager, one of my jobs is to ensure that all of my staff are fit to do their job. So volunteering, yes, you do get free drinks and you are fed. But one of the key rules is you are not allowed to be drunk behind the bar. Sorry.
Or at any other time during the festival, because that's not responsible drinking and goes against one of the main tenets of your license.
You have a question?
Can I ask about this particular cider? So it's made by some wine producers.
Yep.
So are they using the natural fruit yeast, or are they using wine yeast for this one?
No, they'll be using a wine yeast for this. Yep. So quite a specific yeast to bring out and keep those really good fruity flavors there. There are several yeasts that you can use that really sort of marry the attributes of what you get. I've used one this year on one of mine for the first time. I've added a yeast rather than just using all natural. And one of the things you notice on the taste, yes, it's more winey, it's more fruity, but the acids are more diminished. And I've got another barrel of cider with exactly the same fruit blend from the same pressing on the same day, and that is markedly different. The yeast brings a massive amount of effect and change to a drink. It's not all about fruit selection. Fruit selection is a big part of it, but the yeast has the biggest effect on the final flavour of what you're drinking. If you look at beer styles, pop along tomorrow to the Fox at Burwell for the talk on beer styles. That'd be very nice for people to go to. And they're going to be talking about them there, and you notice it in beers, you notice it in a wheat beer, that you get those really high, interesting notes and banana-y notes sometimes in there. And the yeast makes a massive difference. There are special yeasts for doing West Coast IPAs and East Coast IPAs that work with the citrus or the fruity elements or the bittering elements. So, yeah, yeast is really a very big factor and something that people really should think about more. And the great thing is that a lot of the yeast producers, people like Lallemand, they've now got specific people working on yeast for ciders and looking at the way whether you can put beneficial bacteria in there at the same time so that you end up with a much better, rounder, flavoured cider at the end of it. A lot of the time, to be honest, I like the individuality you get from using your own yeast load from what's in the orchards that are around you and on your kit and everything else. But I think there's also a place to bring in that consistency that you get from using other stuff. Oh, right. While we're on yeast, does anybody use wild yeast like they do for lambic beer? Yes and no. Lambic beer is very specifically, they boil up the beer, they run it out into a great big flat copper tank, big square shallow tank. The steam rises up, it hits the oak beams above. All the yeast load and stuff that's living on that then drops back down into the wort, and then that's what then provides the yeast for that beer to be made. So you end up with a lot of incredibly funky flavours, a lot more than you tend to get when you're doing ciders. But you will also get them coming through in cider. You will get occasionally, you'll get a bit of a yeast or a bit of bacteria in there even that will change the nature of the flavour. So you will get that. And to be honest, it's something that we all look for. I've got a cider that I made from russet apples in 2013 or 14, and that got some Brettanomyces into it. So it ended up with this blue cheese flavour, which works really well because you get apple, you get biscuity notes because it's aged, and you get this Brett, this blue cheese, in there as well. If you're a sour beer drinker, it's a really nice cider to drink, or if you just like funky weird stuff like I do. So whoever that was, yes. Wild yeast, yes, not quite in the same way. But
you could probably tell us a little bit more about how bacteria then affects the flavours in the ciders.
Well, normally you would associate bacteria as being bad, and in many situations, bacteria is a bad thing. However, there are a few strains of bacteria which are beneficial. So one of them is the one that results in a malolactic fermentation stage. So it's a particular bacteria that eats malic acid and excretes lactic acid. So lactic acid we tend not to associate as being very acidic. So it turns a cider from being quite sharp to being quite mellow.
yes,
Any other bacteria you're aware of?
not at this moment in time. No.
In that case, shall we go on to the next cider?
That is the main one. Malolactic is something that it's the holy grail for quite a lot of cider makers. It's not something that always happens naturally, and it's not always something that always happens at all. But there are, again, some of the big yeast makers are now looking at doing a combined yeast with the malolactic bacteria in it. So rather than malolactic fermentation would normally take place this time of year, It's normally as the temperature starts to go up, usually around about the 27th of May, apparently.
Well,
And it's that temperature change that will trigger that malolactic fermentation. And what they're looking at is seeing whether or not you can introduce that right at the beginning of the fermentation stage and bring that up and through with it so that you end up with it being finished at a much earlier point.
Now, I think we've covered that Simon's had one of his favourites. Chris has had one of his favourites. This is probably one that's more me in a glass.
That'd have to be a big glass, lad.
And it's the smallest bottle in your box.
well, so
But you're like a genie.
It's got a number 7 on it for those of you who are, are looking for your
So
case of
it's a
box.
330ml bottle with a 7 on the top. And it looks a tad cloudy.
Yeah.
Well,
So we have
yes.
Simon's, Gibson's, Perry.
Indeed. So the smell is again very characteristic of Perry, but in this case, this is a combination of East and West pears?
Ish. No, it's a combination of conference pear and a Wilding Perry pear.
Wilding Perry pear.
Yeah. So the Perry pears are from an orchard that I'm not going to tell you where it is because you're all thieves and rogues. And I know you just go romping around it. But what's happened is that it's an orchard that was planted in the 1840s. There was a couple of rows of pear trees planted. The main tree that was planted has died out. And what's happened is that the rootstock where the tree has been grafted onto, we can talk about that if somebody asks a question, has then thrown up shoots. And some of these shoots have turned into 50-foot high trees. But what they've got on them is what is a wild Perry pear. So they're as yet unidentified, but they're small. They look a little bit like a little russet apple. And you bite into them and your face just gets sucked in. The day I went to walk around this orchard with the owner, and I had a quick look and I thought, oh, they look interesting. And I picked one off and bit into it and went, how much do you want for these? Because they're very, very rare. They're not something you tend to get around this part of the country. You'll get them as ornamental fruit. I know that there are various places around Cambridge that have been planted with them as ornamental fruit. They generally fall to the ground and get driven over. But if I can get there quickly enough, and I do have people who ring me up and say, Simon, they're ready. Do you want to come and get them? So we whiz out and stand at the side of the road in the middle of Cambridge and shake the trees and get the pears off those as well. So they are about. And you've got to check them over carefully and make sure that they're good pears as well. But the other one in here is the conference pear. Tony makes a very good conference pear Perry. Conference pears, for me, using wild fermentation, where I get mine from, they always produce a little bit of an acetic note, and that's right there at the end of fermentation. It's not a fault that grows within it. It's something that naturally happens to it. And that's because the time it takes for the pear juice to start fermenting allows the acetobacter bacteria, which is not a beneficial bacteria most of the time because it's what turns alcohol to vinegar. But if it kicks in early on, then it can give this real twang that we get, that this one has. It's on the nose. There's a very slight hint of vinegariness on the nose or acetic.
Getting
It
sort of
is very, very slight, but there's certainly a lot of fruitiness in both the aroma and the taste.
Yeah, I'm getting the fruitiness. I'm getting an anticipation of sharpness.
Yeah. And then on the palate, I might as well let Duncan. It is his favourite after all.
It's sharp. It's a bit mouth puckering.
Yeah.
But my mouth is watering.
Yeah.
My mouth's watering. I'm
And-
getting some sweetness there.
And this is one of in fact it's the only drink that we have that has this particular characteristic.
Yep.
And the pronunciation of it is disputed. Umami.
Umami. It's got savouriness to it as well.
Yes.
Yes, Pete. Yeah, Pete's just saying that the acidity kind of hits the back of your throat and then disappears very quickly. It's quite a volatile acidity. It's quite sharp. It's citric rather than being malic, so it doesn't have that viciousness that you get with apples. The acidity that you get if you get strong acid into apples, is quite different to what you get in pears. The pear one, it's a bit like the difference between an Indian curry and a Thai curry. An Indian curry will kind of burn all the way down, whereas a Thai curry will kind of hit your palate and then be gone fairly quickly, but you'll get all the punchy notes, and that's really what this does. And because of that acidity making your mouth water and the tannins, those soft tannins that are in there as well, it gives you this real sweet running fruitiness that slowly kind of works away. somebody's asked what the difference is between perry and pear cider. Pear cider is marketed to people who think they don't know what perry is. That's basically it. So the big companies that make cider think that it's much easier to say that pear cider and apple cider and cherry cider and
Goodness knows what other fruit.
Well, that's
Yeah.
where that confusion can come in, because you see, certainly in the earlier days, strawberry cider. Well, strawberry cider wasn't fermented strawberries; it was cider with strawberry flavouring added. Pear cider isn't normally. Sorry, it's
Have
not.
you lost yourself?
Yes, I have lost myself. I will start again. So with pear cider, some people think that it is pear flavoured cider, and some people think it is fermented pears. So that is one of the key problems with the term pear cider, is you don't really know what you're getting. You're either getting pear flavoured cider, and there has been a pear flavoured cider out on the market, or fermented pear juice,
which is perry.
right?
To us.
Which is the proper name is perry. In exactly the same way, fermented grape juice is wine. You don't call wine grape cider, do you? So please call fermented pears perry, not pear cider.
And for those of you who are slightly older than me, and there aren't many of you, perry became quite unfashionable. And in the 70s, Babycham was born. And that was the way Bulmers had of getting rid of vast amounts of perry that nobody really wanted to drink, was they sweetened it up, gave it some fizz, put it in little bottles, and marketed it as a beautiful little lady's drink. And perry kind of disappeared off the map. And there are very few people who make perry. And there are very few people who make good perry as well. Perry it's easy to get wrong. It's moderately difficult to get right, because the pears have got to be pressed at the right time. If you wait too long, they turn to an absolute gloopy mush and they're unpressable. If you do it too early, you don't get enough juice and you don't get the sugars. So it really is something that you've got to be absolutely spot on. I was really lucky the first year I did it, and I've done the same ever since.
Well, Sam, you've done very well, because at medium sweet, fruity, sharp being the highlights, that is pretty much me in a glass.
Good.
That is what that's what I'm personally looking for on the cider bar for me to drink for myself.
Good.
Ignoring the quality of everything else, that's what I fancy. That doesn't mean that there aren't other very good ciders coming along and out there that I might on another day go,
Drink that first.
I'll have one of them.
Yeah.
Which would actually be our next bottle.
We've just had a question come in for the other people that aren't talking as much as me, which is, what is your idea of an ideal cider or perry?
Oh, I think I've just answered
Duncan's
that.
done that one.
Well, for me, it varies from year to year. I prefer sweeter ciders. I'm not a big perry fan. So out of the ones in the two boxes, my personal choice is the Biddington Strong. It hits all my requirements of being very fruity on the sweeter side and on the stronger side. But that doesn't mean that I wouldn't happily drink all of the other ciders and perries that we've got here.
And somebody's asked me the same question. Apparently I'm not talking enough. For me, my ideal cider or perry is very different. When I lived down in the West Country, I used to go to a cider maker called Countryman's Cider out near Tavistock, or Launceston, one or the other. And I used to buy their Countryman's Gold and their Countryman's Medium. And the Gold was a proper sharp, dry cider. And the Medium was a nice medium. It was made differently, so it had different flavour characteristics to it. And I used to take it home and I used to blend them 50-50. And for me, that was absolutely perfect. It was fruity, it was sharp, it was sweet, it was tannic. There were lots of complexity. And to me, anything that brings complexity, I know it's my own, but I love East meets West. It works really, really well. I like the levels and the changes that you get in it. And I prefer it not to be too sweet. If the dominant thing in the cider is the sweetness, then I wonder what was wrong with it beforehand. Because if it's not enhancing the cider, then it's obviously detracting from it. But this fella here, he could suck sugar and complain it wasn't sweet enough. So there is that difference in it. And that's one of the things when you do have ciders is look for the good stuff, because there are fantastic ciders out there. There are fantastic cider makers out there, and they're doing absolutely brilliant stuff. It's not all going to be on the shelves in Tesco's. It's not all going to be on the shelves in Co-op, but there is still some really good stuff there. Get onto the internet, find people out. You will probably have to pay a little bit more for it because it costs us a lot more money to make a litre of cider than it does for Bulmers and Aspel's and the others. We're hard-working guys who try our very, very best. And you know what? If you don't all buy it, Paula will make me drink it.
Well, going on to where you can get good cider, obviously Canberra Beer Festivals, all Canberra Beer Festivals have a cider bar, and you will get decent, proper cider. But also there's a large number of pubs, not just in Cambridge, but all over the country. There are cider pubs. We are sitting in one now, the Plough at Shepreth.
2020 Cider Pub of the Year for the Cambridge branch.
Indeed, and a fantastic range of ciders here, from predominantly from Cambridgeshire, but there's some from other parts of the country. So, if you're interested in cider, try and find a cider pub. If there aren't any convenient ones, try and find a Canberra Beer Festival.
Or a cider bar, maybe.
Well, a cider bar in a Canberra Beer Festival.
Right. Okay. Talking of cider, which is what we're doing, we're going to move on to the last bottle in the boxes. I'm going to upset people at home in a minute because there's something else coming along. But the last one in the box has got a bright blue top on it. There's a reason we've saved this one till last.
It's from the East Anglia and Friends box. This one is from Norfolk, and we were just talking about what our favourite sort of styles were, and I suggested that mine was the last one, which was sort of medium sweet, fruity, and sharp. This is none of those, and yet this is something I would go for a complete change of style to perhaps my normal first preference.
Yeah. So this one is from a Norfolk cider maker, Robbie Crone. So this is Crone's, and this is his rum cask. So cask ciders, typically you would ferment your cider, you would crush your apples, you would ferment in a food safe plastic barrel, and then you would transfer to a either a rum cask barrel or a whiskey cask barrel to mature the cider. And you could mature the cider for a month, 2 months, 3 months. And this is what Robbie has done. Now he has matured this cider in a rum barrel. So that is a cask that was previously used for rum. And one of the questions that came up at the last session is, can you reuse the barrels? And the answer is yes. The first time you use a fresh, empty rum barrel, you end up with a cider that's really strong flavour of rum. Once you've used that, if you use it a year later, you then get a lesser flavour.
A more gentle flavour.
A more gentle flavour. And when you taste this particular cider, I can instantly say this is its second use.
So it's very clear. You certainly smell the rum.
Beautiful on the nose.
The rum is still detectable on the nose. It's still there in the flavour of the cider, but it's not overpowering. Now, one of the other key things is after a while, the sort of flavour towards the back of your mouth is rather woody, which is understandable. It's been matured in a wood barrel. And also the tannins on this, when you've got that drying sensation, it's slightly different to some of the other ciders we've had because they are oak tannins, wooden tannins, as opposed to tannins from the cider. They have leached out of the wood along with the rum in this case.
Somebody's asked if we've got any idea which rum is involved. I think short answer there is no. Generally, people will buy in rum casks. When you buy the casks, most of the time the ends are painted as well. So they'll disguise where they've come from purely because they don't want people using their name further down the line. So generically, you just buy a rum cask. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are places you can buy casks from specific places, from specific distillers. I've got bourbon casks at home from Buffalo Trace and Maker's Mark that I still need to fill up. I might get that job next week.
Now, interestingly, there's Crohn's have another cider that I would normally have this on Norwich Beer Festival cider bar, and I'd normally have the sister drink, the Crohn's Old Norfolk, and that's been made in a similar barrel, but past the point where you can no longer taste the rum. Still a very nice cider. Just if you don't like the taste of rum, you'd go for the old. But you like this, you'd go for the Old Norfolk.
Yeah, and for anybody who had the who's got the East Anglia and further box, the other bottle you've got in there that's been cask aged is the Linley Gold from Udder's Orchard. That's another one where you can quite specifically taste the oak tannins in there. It's got a little bit of Dabinet, around about 10%. The Dabinet will add some tannin to it, but you can definitely taste the distinct notes of oak tannin in there, and it's been aged for probably about 6 months in oak as well.
Yeah, we reviewed that one on Monday, and you can catch that again online, or join us again on Saturday.
Buy a box from simonsider.co.uk/products, blah, 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 blah.
And we'll be going through them all again on Saturday anyway.
And we will, yes.
Yes, I believe we're starting at 5 o'clock.
We're starting at 5 o'clock. The link hopefully will be up on the CBF website for people to find. Our lovely Cambridge Beer Festival website. Hopefully our lovely tech guy who is sitting there looking all glorious at home and drinking water is doing that. If anybody does have a problem finding it, just ping me a message and I'll send you the link. We'll be... Oh, apparently, yes, he has. Yes, in big letters. Thank you. What we'll be doing is we'll be running it in the same sort of way that this stream has been run from 5 through until 10. And that will mean that David will be there to help run the tech side of things, to help push the questions across to me and things like that. And then what we'll be doing at 10 o'clock is we'll be switching over to the after party and we'll be carrying on from there. And I have asked David, and he will probably answer me in a second on this screen, whether or not we can just turn off the YouTube element or whether we have to stop streaming altogether and then restart a Zoom meeting at 10 o'clock. I'll check my email when I get home. Thanks, Dave. Back to the cider. It's absolutely glorious. You can tell it is a second use cask. The rum isn't massively predominant. It doesn't give that big thickness on the palate to it, but it's a very, very nice drink with lots of really good flavour. But if anybody wants, we can go back to tasting bottle number 6, which was the Cromwell Sweetheart, because apparently Tony wasn't taking a lot of notice and missed that. But we decided it was a very full, fruity drink, nice and clear, beautifully sweetened. It's lovely. It is lovely, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah, it is a very, very nice drink.
I think you do have a microphone on your table over there, so you can give us some more information on it if you like. There is a microphone available.
While the tech is catching up with that, we have a question. John wants to know, is there a website which lists all the local cider pubs and bars? Well, in terms of the word local, there is a website called What Pub, so whatpub.com, which lists all of the pubs in the country. And if you want a certain area, you just type in into the search the name of a county. If you know the name of your local cider branch, your local camera branch, if you type in the branch name, you can then get a list of all the pubs in that branch. So either by county or by branch. And then once you've got that list, down the side, there's a whole range of tick boxes for different attributes. One of them is cider pubs, real cider. So if you tick that, it will then resort and then give a list of all of the cider pubs for your search area. So you can find out all the cider pubs in a county or in a camera branch.
So that should give you all of the cider the pubs serving some real cider.
So
from one to many.
Nope.
And do you, by any chance, have a list available publicly where perhaps for each individual branch area, you might know where the top 3 are in terms of camera members that have actually gone around and surveyed?
Right. Okay. Well, most camera branches. So one of the things we do in camera is we have a pub of the year competition and a cider and perry pub of the year competition. So each branch will decide their pub of the year and their cider and perry pub of the year, typically around March, normally mid-March. So the thing to do, apparently I need to be quieter.
Should we talk to Tony for a minute?
So we're going to go to Tony, I think. Sorry, that's what I've just been told.
Yes,
Sorry.
so we've all recharged our glasses with Oliver's Sweetheart.
We've got Sweetheart to get. So I get a second Sweetheart.
Yes.
Yes, stick the microphone right in your face, Tony, so we can hear you, mate.
Yeah.
Tell us about your Sweetheart.
I must confess, it's not my favourite. My favourite is Joyce, which is a medium, because unlike Chris, I haven't got a sweet tooth. But yeah, a little bit disappointed with the ciders, my own as well, because the last 2 years the weather has been abysmal.
Yeah.
The flavour, that appleness that we used to get 3 years ago, we're not getting. I've done two things. I've left apples to the last minute, and then they're pithy, and okay, we get plenty of juice and whatever. Or I've picked them early, and then they've been too acid. But we haven't had that lovely appley, especially in the aroma, the esters that come off.
We've
They're
definitely missed
absent in everybody's cider. At the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But apart from that, all the ciders I've tasted tonight have been good. There's some I'm not too keen on. The number one, I think, was my favourite, actually.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know what you chaps think.
Well, during the process of choosing, I made sure that we had ciders and perries that would contribute to this this program of presentations. So it's a case of choosing ones that I have a high confidence will be exceptional.
And interesting.
And have something
varied.
that we can talk about. It's very easy to get a whole load of ciders and perries with the same set of attributes. But one of the skills of ordering cider for a cider bar is to make sure that you've got a good range of dry, medium, sweet, Eastern style, West Country style, and then some of the more unusual features. So, Biddington is the Kentish style. That's something important.
I can never understand why is Kent any different from us, because the apples they're using are similar to ours.
The main reason of that there's plenty of cider makers in Kent that produce ciders that are similar to what we have in East Anglia. The main point of the Kentish style is it's made in a very wine oriented way. So it's made by so all of the what I would call true Kentish style ciders are made by winemakers who started off making wine and then started to make cider, and they did it using the same equipment and the same yeasts as they do for wine. Right? Whereas traditionally cider makers will use the wild yeasts.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of cider makers down in Kent I wouldn't class as Kentish style. Now, there are also a few cider makers outside of Kent who have a cider that I would call the Kentish style, but I can't because they're not from Kent.
Definitely just more wine-like.
Yeah. So as one of my cider bars, I have a symbol, a sticky label, which is a wine glass. So it's wine-like, and that is the main characteristic of the Kentish style. It is wine-like. Yes.
Very much like a wine.
Yeah, and you'll see if you then took a trip from Cambridge Beer Festival to mine in Norwich, we're using the same sort of attribute stickers. So you'll see the wine-like, the sharp stickers, the West Country analogy sticker, the clear, the cloudy, the cask matured.
Right. So we've got to the end of the box, but we've still got 24 minutes left. So we might as well do something slightly interesting.
Well, while you're looking for something interesting.
So for those of you who are at home, I apologise because you ain't got this.
So you're not going to do the bonus bottle then?
So what we have here are two new ciders from me. Traditionally at Cambridge Beer Festival, I would pretty much every year I launch something new or something different out into what we're doing.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll go back to finishing off what I was saying about branch cider pub of the year.
Yes.
So Canberra branches will typically have their branch pub of the year and their cider pub of the year, and that is on their website. So if you go and you want to find the best cider pub in a particular area, go on to your local Canberra branch's website and look. Go on.
Well, I didn't think it would. I had one that did give a gentle fizz as it went.
So going back to the question, where do you find your best cider pub in your area? The answer is to go to the local branch website and look it up. And if it's not there, just go onto their contact section and ask them.
And we have another website for those for the county wins.
Well, different regions of Canberra organise their competitions slightly differently. So some regions will judge the branch winners and then produce a regional winner. In East Anglia, we do have a county round. So we do have county cider pubs of the year, and they are typically available on the East Anglian Canberra website, along with a full list of all of the branch winners. So if you want an easy way of finding pretty much everything you need to know, the Canberra's East Anglian website. So go into Google, just type East Anglia Canberra, and within the top 5 search results is the East Anglian website.
So Jeffrey's asked, what's the best place, or where is the best place to learn about regional styles, or more generally learn about cider varieties? Best place is Cider Bar at a beer festival, for a start. Online, there's some great information out there. Again, the Canberra Learning and Discovery, that's got a fantastic portal on there for cider. There's lots of people talking about on there. There's some great reviewers out there. If you just go onto Google and click cider reviews, nowadays you will find an absolute plethora of people out there telling you all about cider. Some of them talk absolute sense. Every now and again, they talk like me. But there is a lot of information out there. But to be honest, the very, very best people you can be talking to are people working on cider bars and people working within cider. So go along to events where cider makers are, something like the Game and Country Show at Burley House this week, from Saturday through until Monday, 10 a.m. till 6 p.m, where Simon Cider will be. Come and visit us there and have a chat about stuff. But get out there and meet cider makers, talk to cider makers. Now that we're all allowed to get out there and do things, they're the best places you can learn about stuff, because a lot of cider makers, like myself, will actually work across styles as well. So you will find out from cider makers about how they interpret different styles. So with me doing something like East Meets West, which is a nod towards the West Country, doing something like Dabonet, which is full-on West Country, or Browns or Bittersweet, they're all full-on West Country ciders. And the other thing is the Eastern County style, the single variety stuff, the fruity and the dessert and the Bramley apple and cooking apple stuff is all absolutely fantastic. Again, we just need to go back to the glasses, because we haven't talked about them quite enough. Most of the pubs that are selling the glasses are giving the money to charities, so please go along and buy them. There are still some in pubs. Go onto the Cambridge Beer Festival website, you'll find the link there, and they're all being sponsored by Gearset. They've paid for all of the setup for this year, for the online beer festival and for the glasses, so they've done a great thing for us in that, because without that we'd never have got quite so far along. So yeah, a massive thank you to them for everything that they've done. Right, and if they want to attend a cider tasting, feel free to contact Simon at simoncider.co.uk. Right, so
what do we have here, Simon?
So what we've got here, so this is one that Chris and Duncan and I bottled up a few weeks ago, and it's a single variety. It's made from Spartan apples. Spartan are the apple that I use to give the fruity notes in sweet pea. So in sweet pea, there's also Crispin and there's John Standish. John Standish gives us a lot of juice and a good bit of sugar. Crispin brings some acidity to it. But Spartan is not one that I've used on its own. And yet we had 2 years ago a great number of them available. So I thought, well, I'll just do a pressing on its own. I did about 600 litres. And because we didn't have the beer festival last year, I just left it in the tank, because, of course, I could have taken it to the beer festival this year. But, yeah, anyway, so I am doing. So we've blended this up to be a sweet. There's a little bit of sharpness in there. It's hazy.
Well, certainly one of the interesting things is the aroma. It's not very strong. It's
No.
very delicate. As opposed to the other single varieties we've had
Yep.
so far, they've all had a strong aroma,
Yep.
but nothing on the taste.
No.
Whereas this has got a much more delicate aroma.
Yep.
So when you taste it,
Certainly get a bit of sharpness in it. Which I
again,
don't remember getting in the sweet pea when we talked about it.
a delicate flavour, but it's got a flavour.
And there's a juiciness to it. There's an appliness that carries on. It's quite a long-lasting on the palate. There's pruny notes there, which I'm assuming are coming from the age, from it just having been sat maturing for 2 years, that it's done nothing but sit there. It hasn't been moved around. It's been in a cold store, and it's just sat. It tastes really, really nice. We're going to start rolling it out to pubs. It'll be in bottles this weekend out for sale. But it's one of those nice ones where between the three of us, we went through a grade of tastings on it. And having it as a medium sweet just didn't work. There was nothing there of any element that actually stood up and said, drink more of me. So we pushed it more towards the sweet end of the scale. There's still that little bit of sharpness there. But at that sweet end of the scale, you're getting that fruitiness and you're getting those lingering notes. There's a little bit of strawiness on the nose there as well, which is quite nice. Like sort of not quite green grass, but...
Very drinkable.
Yeah.
So, Simon, this is a component of your sweet pea.
So it is, yeah.
We looked at your sweet pea for the first time on Monday. So we'll be revisiting it again on Saturday, and it's in the Cambridgeshire cider box.
It is.
Available from
simonsider.co.uk.
as presumably is the bottle on its own.
As the bottle will be on its own as soon as I've actually done the proper launchy bit and put it on the website. Thanks, Paula. Pete, yes. How did we come by the Spartan apple? So one of the orchards that we get apples from is up at Bluntisham. They've got a good variety of apples up there. Tony uses the same guy as well and gets fantastic fruit from him as well. The great thing about that orchard is that there is a lot of variety. There's a lot of older fruit in there as well. And it's a great place to get a really good mix of stuff. So we buy the grade outs. We buy the stuff that wouldn't go to market, the stuff that's too big, too small, that's scabby, that's bashed. It's the kind of stuff that sorry, when I say we, I mean the hours and hours that are spent by my beautiful friends, of which a lot of them are sitting over there, who come out on weekends and help us pick. This year has been especially difficult because of all the COVID stuff. There haven't been the staff to go and pick apples from the orchards. So we actually went along and for the first time this year, we're able to pick direct from the ground under the trees and directly from the trees. So we managed to get a better price on it because we were doing the picking work on it. But it also meant that we were able to be that little bit more selective this year as well and pick some fruit that we'd not had in the past because we didn't have access to the orchard. We just had access to the fruit. So yeah, it's I mean, Simon's cider, the reason it works is because of the hard work that so many other people put into it. I'm just the brains, the brawn and the passion. Other people lump stuff about. What?
I think it was the brains bit that I think they're laughing at.
Phew.
Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations, you signed up to a comedy night.
Yes. But the great thing is that we do have suppliers around here. Not only do we go and scavenge stuff from roadsides and things like that, but we also get access to some of the best grown examples of Eastern Counties dessert and cooking fruit from brilliant growers as well. So that came from there. It's a beautiful apple. It hangs on the trees like black grapes. Hopefully on Saturday I can get Bert to help me share the screen or a picture of the backdrop of the Spartan apple photos that we took, because they're an absolutely beautiful, beautiful apple. They've got a crisp white flesh. They've got a beautiful dark purple skin to them. And I think it's made a really nice, properly drinkable drink. It's not up there in my ones and twos of what we do, but it has become a very, very nice drink. Right.
You have another bottle in front of you, Simon.
We do.
A mystery bottle.
So this is a happy accident. Again, Chris and Duncan were kind of involved in this. Is that I had a cider that just hadn't started fermenting. It was in the tank. The juice hadn't kicked off fermenting. And I took out 30 litres of it and put it into another fermenter and then tipped some live fermenting juice into the tank that the rest of this was in. But I put this to one side. And it's should be a... Oh, come on. Yeah. Have you got the big bottle opener there? So these are in a champagne bottle. Hopefully they're going to have a sparkle to them as well. This is all exciting for me as it is for you. Yay! So that's what we wanted. That lovely little bit of CO2 lifting out at the top of the bottle there. So the reason we put these into champagne bottles is because they've been bottled with residual sugars. They hadn't fully finished fermenting. I didn't want something really sparkly like a commercial cider. What I wanted something was what we now apparently call pétillant naturel, where you get this little gentle bubble to it. So it's just made from a mix of dessert apples. There is more here, Pete, if you...
Now, one of the key things with these types of ciders is to make sure that as you get down the bottle, you don't get a gob load of the yeast that is settled to the bottom.
Well, you can. What we could do with these is we could have done it in the champagne style, where we would turn the bottles over and put them into a pupitre, which is a wooden rack that bottles, and they sit at an angle, and as you turn the bottle, the yeast moves down it. But let's just get in for a taste of it and see what people think.
Well, the aroma is a little bit farmyardy.
Little bit farmyard.
Which is not a negative.
No, we discussed farmyards on Monday, and we didn't, unfortunately, have anything farmyardy tonight. But some of that's coming from the fact that it's been fermenting in the bottle as well. The yeast gets starved. You get a little bit of hydrogen sulfide, which gives you a slightly eggy note to it. It's quite fruity,
and the effervescence is very pleasant.
Yeah, and it's fully natural effervescence as well. That's come purely from the fructose, from the apple sugars.
So this is just personal preference. I remember trying this before you'd added this effervescence, and I think if anything, I actually prefer this one flat.
Yeah, fair enough.
But that's my personal preference. So.
Well, there's only about 50 bottles of it left, so.
One of the key things is the tannins on this are different to the tannins we've had before. For me, all of the tannin I'm getting is just on the tip of my tongue.
Yeah, and that's just going to be coming from skins and from seeds. Right, we're pretty much at the end of this. I do apologise that the last 10 minutes hasn't been the most exciting bit of the night for those of you sitting at home, but we've quite enjoyed it. I'd like to thank Gearset again for everything they've done to be able to put this festival on. I'd like to thank the Plough and Nick and his wonderful, wonderful staff for all the hard work they've put in tonight. I'd like to thank Bert, Neil and David, who've been running the tech for us again tonight. They're doing a fantastic job, and I hope everybody at home is managing to get all the nuances. I'd like to thank the lovely people that have turned up tonight, cider makers and non-cider makers, but you're all lovely and you all work really, really hard. I'd like to thank Chris and Duncan as well for the work that they've put in over the last few weeks as well, with helping with bottling and getting the ciders ready so that we can actually get them out to you. And don't forget, cider boxes are still available at simonsider.co.uk, and we'll be back on 5 o'clock on Saturday for a full-on tasting of both boxes, which are still available from simonsider.co.uk.
And of course, we must remember
and
to
will
thank
hopefully
Simon
be delivered in time for
actually putting together the infrastructure without which these boxes wouldn't be happening anyway.
Indeed.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you very much.